Welcome to Donuts Design and Debate, the podcast where we discuss and you get to decide how many preeminent donuts a particular design receives. I'm Matt Robison, the moderator for today's debate, and this time we're talking about collaborative design reviews. So, again, this is sort of like a previous episode where we're getting a little meta on the design. It's not like a product or like a movement or anything like that we're talking about the design merits of. It's more the design review process. So let's talk about the history of design review process before we bring on our guests and get into the voting. So, okay, we're going back to 1439, folks. Get in the time machine. We're talking movable type. Gutenberg printing press invented in 1439. This was part of the start of the democratization of information, and this led to people being, spreading knowledge and being able to make their own decisions for themselves. And fast forward a couple of years to the 1980s. And 90s, with personal computing and desktop publishing becoming more popular, design became more in the hands of lay people or non-designers, or giving access to people who typically in the past would not have had access or knowledge to design and how things are designed and good design. I think that technology and design have been sort of interdependent or intertwined. Let's talk about the arts and crafts movement as a response to mechanization and industrialization. More recently, technology allowing for remote work that sort of has transformed the way people do design of physical spaces like offices and homes, but also how those designs are reviewed as well. Talk about accessibility with like Adobe Creative Suite, or with, even things like Pinterest, clients getting to know their sort of design ideas into the actual process of a designer working. These are all things that lead up to what we today consider collaborative design review. Of course, there's the in-person idea of sort of looking at documents or scale models or 3D models, or, if you're interior design, like swatches of materials or things of this nature. You can be going over a tablet or a computer, or, VR goggles, or there's a bunch of different ways to review a design with a client. But really what we're going to be talking about today is that sort of that back and forth communication, the conversational feedback, and making real-time notes and changes to a design. Is that good? Is it bad? We are about to find out, and we have a couple great debaters on either side of this debate who will get to try to sway you with their opinions. So the first of them is Aaron Dietzen, my co-host. And also, please welcome to the show for today our guest. He is an architect and podcast host. We have David Lee. Welcome to the show. All right.
Awesome. Welcome, David.
How's it going?
Hi. That was one of the most informative and entertaining intros I've ever seen and heard. It was a dance. There was applause and facts.
Hey, sound effects help a lot to spice it up. But thanks again for being on the show, David. And so I want to talk about your background in design and design review. So why did you pick this topic today to talk about collaborative design review?
It's a good question. So as you mentioned, I'm an architect and I have my own practice. And so because of that, much of my free time is spent thinking about how we work with clients and how to be more effective in that space. With the format of your show, I had a few other topics in mind. I wanted to talk about baseboards, but I wasn't sure that would be enough for more than 5 minutes, mainly because I don't like them because they gather dust, and that's about the extent of my argument. But for the reviews, it's kind of an interesting thing, because I think on the one hand, it might sound obvious that anything dealing with collaboration is a positive thing. And obviously I'm arguing for it today. But they can also be very tricky because there's a lot more pressure on the designer, I think. And you have to know how to work with whoever you're speaking with. In our case, most of the time it's the client. And so I just find them very fascinating because everything's coming to head in that one space. You have all of your work you've produced, and at the same time, all of it's on the line, and you're waiting to see what the other person is going to say in response. So it's something I think about quite a lot.
Well, I want to start by saying I think baseboards are great. And now we've had a mini debate in here too. So listeners, this is a bonus session. You got 1.1 debates in this particular podcast. So well done. Good job, guys.
Quarter. Nice. That's awesome. So how much, and maybe this is leaking into your argument a little bit, but how do you handle your design review process with clients without giving us too much on the actual argument side?
Yeah, sure. So we always, when it comes to presenting our work, and work extends to even proposals and contracts also, we always have a live meeting with the client, not a phone call. It's at a minimum a Zoom meeting. And not a Zoom meeting where they're on their phone in their car while they're driving the Tesla or something. No, where they're sat down and they're in front of the screen and they're paying attention, or obviously live in person. And that's pretty much become our standard. We've done presentations or reviews other ways where they're less present in whatever manner, and they just we haven't found them to be as successful.
Gotcha. Nice. Looking forward to some good tips. Hopefully some of the designers in the audience today can find some valuable information on how to handle their own design reviews with clients. And speaking of that, hot dog, we're going to get into the debate. So because David, as he mentioned earlier, is the pro side of the argument today, he is going to be doing the opening arguments first. So how the format of the show works, we'll do a couple opening arguments, then we'll get into the actual voting, and hey, that's the fun part. That's what you're here for, so stay tuned for that. It's going to be hot, and it's going to be good. But first, we have to lay it out all on the floor, and so that starts with the opening argument. David, why don't you give us about 5 minutes on why do you think collaborative design reviews are good design?
I think probably the biggest reason why I'm for them is it allows everyone on both sides to get more information from the meeting. Let's say it's an hour-long meeting or an hour-and-a-half meeting. I think that when presentations or reviews are done in other ways where the information is conveyed in a much more one-directional manner, you don't get live feedback. And really, when you're working with somebody, whether you be the client and you're working with the designer, or you're the designer working with the client, it's all about getting as much feedback and as accurate feedback as you can get. And one of the things that we've learned is that being able to see the person on the other end is a crucial part of it. Because as we all know, as an example, when you write an email and it says whatever statement, that can be interpreted in 50 different ways. It can be read as very positive, and oftentimes it's read as a very negative way. Whereas when you're looking at the individual, you're able to catch the nuances of when they're not so sure about something, when they're extra enthusiastic, or when they are making a statement, but they're also saying, but there's all these other possibilities that might not allow this to take place, or whatever it might be. And so I think that this kind of review process allows for more information to be covered, more ground to be covered, and more different topics to be spoken about in a very concise period of time. But it also allows just more data to be gathered because of the body language, because of the subtleties I was talking about. I also think that these kinds of live feedbacks greater allow both parties to convey a sense of hierarchy with the information that's being discussed. So let's say on the extreme, in an email format or a single kind of presentation direction format, sometimes it's hard to clarify that even though I'm giving you 20 pieces of information, they're not all equally important, and one is more important than the others, and they all kind of have a certain kind of network and how they fit with each other. And as we all probably know, design and certainly architecture is such a complicated thing, and all of its aspects are always being interwoven together in different ways, and conveying that network effect and the hierarchy is just, at least for us, a lot easier to do when we're seeing the person that we're speaking with and we're trying to read them. Sort of like, I suppose, a comedian to an audience. It'd be really difficult to do a set if you don't see the audience on the other end. And that's probably the bulk of the argument. I think also in terms of simplicity, which is, I know, one of the topics we're going to talk about. It's kind of funny because honestly, my first thought is that they're not simple. They're not simple things at all. In the moment when you're doing them, they're very, very complicated. But I do think that maybe from a client's perspective, it is simpler to say, let's have a meeting. We'll frame it within an hour and a half, noon to 1:30, and we'll figure out as much as we can, and then boom, we're done. Whereas sometimes when information gets communicated in a more fractured way, like it's a email there, email there, quick phone call, it gets very, very messy and confusing, especially with projects that last a couple of years or so. So I think in some ways we could package it as being simple because it's all kind of neatly wrapped up into one big session. And I'll leave it there for my opening argument. Okay,
perfect. Sounds great. I love the comedian, an architect as comedian. I want to get a ticket and sit in on one of your reviews if you can entertain that. But
I secretly want to be a comedian, so that's my thing.
Podcasting is a great way to get back into that. That's right here.
I know. My architecture podcast is just an excuse to say ridiculous jokes.
Nice. I have no idea what that's like.
Audience laughter. Perfect.
Awesome.
Nice. Well, cool. That was a great opening argument. And now we're handing over to Aaron to talk about, hey, why do you think collaborative design reviews are not good design?
Okay, so here's the thing. I'm not going to come in here and say we shouldn't be collaborating with our customers. Of course we should. Caveat. Frank Lloyd Wright, if you're listening, you got your own thing. I get it. That's, don't throw that in my face. Yes, there's designers out there who are up here and they do what they want and people just pay for their designs. Yeah, cool. We're talking about real designers. That was unintentional mudsling. Anyhow, focused. Here's the thing. If I go in with my design and I'm going to present it to the customer, I'm the expert. So when I go into a review, I should be presenting as the expert. It's not to say that I shouldn't get feedback, but my design should be carrying the process. And while feedback is accepted, it's not the position where I should be putting the customer in the driver's seat. That's putting the wrong person. That's grabbing somebody from coach out back and putting them in the cockpit and letting them steer the plane. That's not what we need to be doing. Design, we want this process to be quick, short, simple. Like David said, collaborative design is not simple. It's not easy. It's difficult. We want these to be quick and easy for the customer. As a designer, I go in, I tell them, here's the design, here's the options, here's where we need feedback. Let them tick the boxes, get the important stuff from them, but let's not make it a jungle. Let's not make it a scene. Let's make it as simple as possible. As a designer, I should be able to go in and gather the needs up front, and then these, I'm not going to call them formalities. They're definitely good touch points to have, but I don't have to get collaborative with it if I've done my job up front, gotten the information that I need, and pull that into the design. The fact is, we're designers because we've learned to design. Non-designers get distracted by the things that we shouldn't be worrying about, right? They don't know what the important parts are when, that sort of thing. And if we have to go in as designers and guide them through that process, that's extra work on our back rather than moving the design forward. If this is a point where we have to worry about the building envelope, where we have to worry about easement, that sort of thing, we don't need to spend time talking about wallpaper or cabinetry or anything like that, because we know as designers this is the spot we should be working on. Opening up to collaborative design, lets us wander around potentially, and we shouldn't have to spend our time roping people in. I get the idea of trying to read people, but adding to what we have to know how to do, adding that being a psychiatrist or psychologist, being able to break down what a person says or means, we shouldn't have to do that. We should be able to go in with the thing that we are there for. We're there to make the design. We're there to make something happen, and we should be able to as experts go in with that and not rely on the person who is paying us to do our expertise to tell us how to do it. So that's just a peek. I got more points. I'm going to save my points for the actual voting because that's the good stuff. I want to. It's a taste. What I got?
Oh no! There's more.
Oh boy, he's
sweating already.
Got plenty more in the hopper.
That's right.
Nice, very good. Leave the psychology to the psychologists
and the comedians.
Makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah, that's right. Who knows? But so, David, I'm sure there's some stuff that Aaron said that you took some issue with. Is there any particular points that he made that you want to respond to?
Actually, to my detriment, I agree with everything you said. What's funny is that it kind of reminds me that. So, we have a podcast and we have an Instagram and we publish clips on there every now and then. And maybe a month ago, we published a reel from one of our episodes. And we were essentially saying in the 60-second clip, like, clients, if you're looking to hire an architect, one of the reasons to hire them is for them to be a stress reliever for you. Like, don't like the pitch was, and by the way, we do residential single family. So we tend to be dealing with other issues that maybe commercial architects don't, like marital problems. But in that clip, we say, use them as a stress. They should be used for one reason as a stress reliever, as opposed to if you do a project on your own, you're going to try to pick all the materials by yourself, coordinate the contractor, coordinate the schedule, and all these other things. Like, don't do that. One of the benefits of using an architect is they'll help you be less stressed out about the whole thing. Trust the expert, which is kind of like what you're saying. And the funny thing is I thought that clip would have not caused any controversy, because in my mind, I'm like, that is one of the things we have to do. Whether or not we want to do it is another question. I don't really want to be doing it, but it's part of the gig, especially in the residential space. The amount of controversy we got over that one clip blew my mind. So many people, mostly architects and designers who follow us, were really upset at what we said. They're like, this is absurd. You're degrading the profession by saying that we're stress relievers. There's so much more that we do that's beyond this, and et cetera, et cetera. So I'm confused as to which side I'm arguing now. But I'm confused myself.
It's a good story. It's still a good story. It's yeah. Wow, but, that's crazy.
It's so despite this debate we're having, I would have not thought that would have taken place, but people were very upset by it. Of course, I think, kind of to your point, the architect or designer, we do a lot of different things. There's like 100 different things we do. And it is certainly sometimes challenging, and it feels like it's outside of our responsibility to do some of the hand-holding, the educating of the process, the roping people in and whatever. And I agree that if an architect or designer does a significant part of the responsibility, which is at the very beginning of the project, to gather as much information as possible to create a design that's responsive to that and makes sense and answers all the questions that the client has, that can potentially greatly mitigate the need to be roping people in throughout the entire process. Having said that, I do think if we're talking about clientele who's never done a project like this before, or they aren't as experienced as the architect, which they never are typically, these tasks that we have to take on, these responsibilities, are just inherent to the gig, and unfortunately or fortunately, they can't really be avoided, and it's part of it. I think also, I'll leave it there for the moment. Yeah.
Aaron, what do you think about that?
I'm still trying to figure out which side of the argument David's story fell onto.
Bouncing around. Straight down the middle, maybe. No, it's definitely on his side.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I can see how people would go either way. I think if you do something and you're in a service and you do it well, you're going to spread yourself across multiple. I mean, there's no way you can say, I'm doing this for you and I'm only going to take care of this much and then everything else is yours. That's a rough spot, especially when you're wandering into something you don't know how to do. Most people don't, and that's like I said, that's the basis of my argument is, well, yeah, you don't know how to do it. That's why you're hiring me. So just sit down and enjoy my design and don't talk.
There was a chalkboard. I saw it on social media. There's a design office and they had a storefront, ground level, next to sidewalk, like highly walkable situation. And they had a sign in the front that said like different prices for their design. And I forget the numbers exactly, irrelevant. It said, like, if we do the entire design, it'll cost you like $100. Next tier is, if we do design and you provide feedback, that's $150. If we do the design and you have like extensive feedback, that's $200. If we co-design, that's like $5,000. If you do the design, then that's like, $10,000 or something. And it's kind of like, I wish I could find that piece, but it's kind of like to your point, which I totally get. And I have days where I feel that way. It's like, if you're paying me money to do this for you, then let me do this for you. Get out of your own way, kind of thing. I think though, it's interesting because in design sessions that we've had with clients, the reality is that if they don't leave the meeting feeling really, really, really convinced by whatever decision they've made, like let's say a design option they've decided to go with. If they're not truly convinced by it at the end of the meeting and they still give you the green light, there's a very good chance 1 or 2 weeks later, they're going to come back and say, hey, guess what? I've changed my mind. And I'm sure we've all been in that situation. And it's obviously deeply disturbing for designers because you're always looking for the next kind of checkpoint to hit. We've gotten approval. Oh, okay, done. I know now we're not doing a big circular building. It's going to be square. We can explore the square thing. And it's a heartache to then 2 weeks, a month, or a few months later for them to come back and say, I want a squiggle. I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? What? You agreed. We have it in writing. You sent an email. You said you're good with the square one. And so I guess the point of that is, even if we want to be the expert and we want them to just trust us, if there's any kind of hesitancy on their end, there's only so much you can do to kind of sway someone unnaturally. And so that's where I think having the live conversation is very helpful, because you can actually gauge more accurately whether or not they truly feel committed to this thing. And it's such a difficult thing because with the schedule, I feel like, at least for me, I'm always trying to get that approval so I can move on, because time is always against us. But at the same time, I have to recognize that I can't push it too much, because if they're just not comfortable, then that approval is essentially meaningless. So that's where the in-person conversation or Zoom conversations, they're more difficult, and you have to have more patience with it sometimes. But I think it allows that more nuanced level of reading.
Interesting. And it seems like you're kind of saying that if they have kind of a stake, or like if they have say in some of the design process or some choices or something, they may be more likely to not go back on what was, the road that they were traveling along, which seems like a positive thing.
Yeah, 100%. I think, and a lot of clients, they do like being part of the process to some degree. Not all of them, but some of them, they like that feeling that, I'm in the action with the designer. I get to be involved somehow, and it's sort of a vicarious experience, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Well, we've gone a lot of places, but now it comes down to the real deal, the top 5 principles. And hey, if you've been here before, we got some new ones for you, so you're in luck. This is going to be an exciting one. How it's going to work is, if you're listening later, you're out of luck. You had to come to the live show in order to vote and decide the outcome. So for those in the live chat, you have a great responsibility of voting based on the arguments for each of our 5 principles of design, whether or not it's good. We'll go through one by one. The poll will pop up at the bottom. Our debaters will go back and forth, and you decide in real time what you who you agree with. So our first principle that we're going to talk about is, are collaborative designs useful? And David, you'll give us about a minute on why you think they are.
Yeah, I think I might have covered some of these things already, but I think they are very useful for what they are because they allow more information to be conveyed by both people. It allows for a more honest kind of conversation to take place, which is another topic, I think, and allows you to cover ground much more quickly. Even in this, I think actually even in this debate session we're having this is a very good example of how nuanced you can get within 20 minutes, which would be very difficult if there wasn't that kind of space. And I do think we should be open to hearing clients' ideas for projects and welcoming them because it makes them feel like they're part of it. And also, you never know. Clients sometimes have really good ideas that we just never thought about.
Yeah, absolutely. Aaron, why do you think that they're not useful?
Well, if these clients had good ideas, then they could just go into design themselves. I think it's a time waster. I think it's time that I don't have to have. I mean, if as a designer, I already have to put together drawings or models and I have to share that anyhow, having to add a live meeting on top of that it's just extra work. It's less useful. I could be spending more time on the design if I can handle just passing these off afterwards. So I just got to say, no, I do not think they're useful. I do not think it's a good way to spend my time.
Unfortunately, our audience disagrees with you. They are useful. One donut in the bag. Okay, that leads us to our next principle, which is, oh baby, it's a new one. You've never seen this one before. This one is all about innovation. So the question is, are collaborative design reviews innovative? And Aaron, you'll go first.
No. I mean, asking someone else to do your homework for you, that's not innovative. That's been happening for years. That's nothing new. I think you want to talk about innovation. Let's talk about sending somebody a QR code that they can pull up and view VR of their design. That's innovation. Getting in collaborative or interactive sign off. That's innovation. I think there's a lot of ways you can do innovation in designs and without having to go spend time having the non-professional try to stick their nose in there. And I think that there's innovation, but this is not it.
David, what do you think?
Innovation is a tough one for me, to be honest. On my side of the argument, I will say, so what I came up with was, I think it's innovative in the moment because the body communication and the art of communicating with another human being when it comes to a complicated issue such as design is so difficult and endlessly challenging, right? That it gives every designer and every client potentially to be innovative in the moment in that meeting to figure out how you're going to communicate with each other and how you're going to have a fruitful working relationship, even if you have, especially when you have conflicting ideas. And as much as it would be nice to have kind of a set standard way of doing collaborative design reviews, it's different every single time. And so there's a little, going back to the comedian thing, there's a little bit of like improvisation. And so you're always inventing with each of the meetings.
Yes, you are. You're inventing, and the audience thinks so too. Number 2 donut. Put it in the bag. Okay, our next principle is on simplicity. And so, David, why do you think that collaborative design reviews are simple?
I just argued the opposite. I think they're simple because they're elegant in the sense that it's like a bubble of time, effort, and process. And I like that it's a bubble, and I like there's a beginning and an end. And when you're in that 90-minute meeting, let's say, it's kind of like a story, and it's hopefully neatly wrapped up if you're doing it right. There's always kind of opening statements, meeting agendas, and at the end there's conclusions, and then at the end of it too, you talk about next steps. And I also think in terms of the client being more involved in the design, as kind of Aaron's talking about, I think it is, in the end, a simpler thing to have the clients be more involved. Because I think when you don't involve them, assuming and they want to be to some degree, you're just prolonging the inevitable. they're going to come back with more red lines, or more, not red lines, more comments, more feedback, more criticisms, and you're dragging out the process, when what we have to do, I think, is kind of bite the bullet, grind through and have those difficult conversations and have them be involved, even when maybe we don't want them to, earlier on, to set the tone correctly. Otherwise, it's kind of like almost a passive-aggressive relationship.
Okay, interesting. Passive aggression, no good. Aaron, I heard tell you don't think these reviews are simple. How come?
I got 2 points. One, I want to remind everybody who's voting that you can change your vote. You can actually go to that poll, and you can click on the other one if you need to set yourself right. And here's my second thing. All I'm going to do is I'm going to quote a professional. I'm going to quote professional architect and podcaster David Lee when he said, "These things aren't simple." I could actually tell you the time he said that. I could. No, not simple. No more needs to be said.
Wow, he's got timestamps, folks, and it shows. No donut for simplicity.
That may be my one donut.
One's good enough. Okay, so our next one, another new one. This is exciting for people here. We're going to talk about, are collaborative reviews understandable? And Aaron, you're going to start.
All right. See, here's the thing. If you want understandable, I think that we got to take ourselves back a little bit and look at what the deliverable you're actually putting out there is. Hopefully, if you're a designer worth your salt, I don't know what that saying means, but it just came out of my mouth. And as it came out, I went, I think that's what I mean. If you're worth it, then your deliverable is understandable and you don't actually need to meet. If you're delivering them, the drawings, 3D models, VR, whatever that is, if you're delivering to them and it's well put together, you shouldn't need anything else. So adding a meeting on there where you have to explain and go back and forth, that's just extra steps that shouldn't be necessary. So I don't think it's more understandable to have to add that other layer of communication. I think solid deliverables are the most understandable solution there.
David, are these reviews understandable design?
Yeah, they are. I as much as I agree with Aaron in terms of like the ideal situation and ideally what we want, it's the same thing that I used to preach to students. You should have your pinup, you should state everything you need to state, and we're going to do a silent pinup so you don't even get to present. The reality is, especially when we're working with non-designers, is that they don't know how to read things. And also, as great as I might think myself as being for creating clear graphics and clear emails, I still don't rely on myself because having another layer of information just always makes it easier. And it's a bummer to take more time out of the day and to schedule something and then have to reschedule if they miss it, But we just seen from experience that you're what am I saying? You're kind of like sacrificing time in the short term for the long-term gains.
Interesting. Design is its own language and clients don't speak that language. And our audience here agrees with you. Yes, design collaborative reviews are understandable. Another donut. Very good. Okay, that leads us to our fifth and final donut principle. And that question is, are collaborative design reviews honest, David?
Yes, they are. And that's what I like about them the most, probably, is you can't avoid the honesty. Assuming you can get over the social pressures and the kind of the nerves that come with dealing with the client in person sometimes, if you can get over that, then it's the most honest way to move a project forward. Because in addition to the information I was talking about being conveyed, that's more conscious, like what you're saying, there's all of the unconscious information, such as the body language, or such as the hesitance, the pauses in the speech, which you don't do intentionally for effect, but you do because it's natural. And that goes for both sides. So I think it's a very honest form of communicating, and it allows for a great deal of transparency, which is a bonus if you're good at your job. If you're not, then it's a bad thing.
Good point. Aaron, your thoughts on honesty?
I want to look at this from the opposite point of view, not as a designer, but as the customer coming in, being shown, design tools, drawings, all this stuff they're not familiar with, and being told they gotta give input, they gotta give feedback. I would see that as being a tough spot, to be under pressure to do things. I think it'd be hard to be totally honest, especially if you're coming into somebody who spent hours, days, weeks, months on this design, and it's not good. I have a hard time disappointing people, so I really would struggle to be fully honest in that situation. So I just think that there's better ways to do this, and that could potentially lead to some dishonest results. That was what I had.
All right, the votes are in, the polls are closed, and yes, honesty is a donut. That means that collaborative reviews have 4 out of 5 design donuts.
Yay!
Well done, well argued. Interesting points brought up on both sides, and we thank you both for your thoughts here today. Before we say goodbye for the day, David, we sort of alluded to it earlier. You have an architecture firm, you have a podcast. Where can people find more about you online?
Yep, sure. So both our office and our podcast have Instagrams. That's maybe the easiest way. I don't know. Our podcast our podcast name, first of all, is The Second Studio, Design and Architecture Show. And the podcast handle is Second Studio Pod, at Second Studio Pod. And then our office is FAME, F-A-M-E Architects, and it's FAME_architects, which is our Instagram handle. And our website is famearchitects.com.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks. Yeah, definitely check them out. To everybody listening, you'll find a great deal of interesting stuff and value from following both those accounts. So please do. On account of everyone here at SketchUp, from Aaron, thank you, David. Thanks for listening. Thanks for voting. And we'll catch you next time. Thanks. This has been a Trimble Media production. Thanks for listening to Donuts, Design, and Debate. If you're fired up about design and you want to be a guest debater, hey, send us an email at donuts@trimble.com. And hey, take a second to leave a rating if you like the show. Thanks again for tuning in, and take care.